Hi, I had the privilege of interviewing the legendary Brett Wilson, Dragon's Den entrepreneur, successful business mogul, and I have to say that it was an absolute privilege. He was not what I thought he was going to be. I was expecting a nice person, but I was expecting someone a lot more fierce and strong towards me in an interview, and he was the exact opposite. He was soft, welcoming, heartwarming, shy, and talkative at the same time. It by far was an eye-opener of what it means to be an amazing human being, and it was an absolute privilege. So here's part one of this interview where he talks about his beginnings, where he came from Saskatchewan, and how he got to where he is.
What's the backstory behind your leap into entrepreneurship?
You know, the world of entrepreneurship is an interesting opportunity, and it's certainly one that wasn't front burner for me. I grew up in small town Saskatchewan. I finished an engineering degree at the University of Saskatchewan and came to Calgary. My job, I was working as a young engineer with Imperial Oil. I got up into the Arctic. I went across BC, I went across Alberta, I went across Saskatchewan. I saw the oil and gas world from a drilling engineer's perspective, not an entrepreneurial spirit. I jumped ship with Imperial and ended up doing a business degree at the University of Calgary. I had a tough time getting in because they asked me, how many years work experience do you have? And I said, well, 3. They said, you need at least 5. They asked me what my GMAT was, the entrance exam. I said, well, I haven't even written it. They asked what my graduating average was, and I kind of muttered 59.5, almost 60. And they said, look, you don't qualify. You're not getting in. So I went downstairs at the University of Calgary, and I phoned up to a guy who was the former dean of the business school at the University of Saskatchewan. That was Mike Maher. And I was given permission to see him for 5 minutes. That's what his assistant said. So the original, call it Dragon's Den pitch, was being formulated in my brain as I'm riding the elevator. And I go to see this Mike Maher, and I'm hoping I can get into the MBA program. Because again, I've been rejected. And I chat with him and he says, look, I'll let you in on 3 conditions. 1, you got to get a grade point average of at least A or whatever. You got to get a minimum GMAT of some number that was reasonably aggressive but not silly. And number 3, he said, I want you to stay out of student politics, because he knew that the world of student politics, I had something like 6 or 7 elected positions in my last several years on campus. So I had been distracted by the world of student politics. He let me in. I got the GMAT, I got the grade point average, and at the end of my first year, I asked for permission to go back into student politics.
During your academic journey, was there a specific course that you found exceptionally interesting?
One of the most interesting courses was consumer and buyer behavior. And then build on that, I took several entrepreneurship classes. And all of a sudden, the sparkle was starting to be created. The idea that I could actually run a business on my own and maybe build an opportunity to do something more with my own life. I got out of the MBA program and landed a job with one of the biggest investment banks in Canada at that time. It was called McLeod Young Weir. They ended up being bought by Scotia, but I spent 5 years there and realized that I was unhappy with the business model of the big investment bank, and that was they wanted to be all to everyone, whether it was an oil and gas company, a pipeline company, electricity company, an airline company, or real estate company, because we had all of them in Calgary. I wanted to focus on oil and gas. So I jumped ship to a small shop. Within a few days, I knew that I'd made a mistake in terms of jumping to that shop. I spent about 1.5 years trying to figure out what else I would do. It's interesting when you talk about how does the world of entrepreneurship unfold. Well, some people believe that they're born to be an entrepreneur. I was forced to be an entrepreneur. I didn't want to go back to the big job I had. I couldn't stay where I was. So I was left with virtually no choice but to start my own business. My dream wasn't to be an entrepreneur, but the outcome was I had to be an entrepreneur in order to break loose from where I was. So I started a brokerage firm, marketing oil and gas properties, Wilson Mackey, and of course my partner was Jamie Mackey, and we had a great run, great partnership. We spent 2 years together doing what we did as oil and gas guys, and then we rolled what we were doing into the new business of FirstEnergy. And that was really where I took a dominant role with Jimmy Davidson, Rick Grafton, and Murray Edwards. And we built FirstEnergy into something pretty impressive. It was the #1 oil and gas related firm, we would do what was called cradle to grave. We were the only investment bank. At that time, the small investment banks would help start a firm, and then once the market cap hit 100 million, 200 million, they graduated and they left the small firms to go to the big firms. We said, no, we're going to be set up to be something for everyone at all times, and I call it cradle to grave. We would help start the business, we'd help grow the business, and at some point, once it had matured, we'd help sell it. Sometimes entrepreneurs are thought to be sole practitioners. I have never been a sole practitioner. I do live in my own office, I have my own staff. What I do in terms of business is with partners, and FirstEnergy was a classic example. That's my start to finish in terms of my business career at FirstEnergy, and I'll finish with, I retired on my 50th birthday.
Can you share insights about the impact of behavior on marketing strategies?
One of the most interesting courses I ever took was called Consumer and Buyer Behavior. The question was, why do people do what they do when they make the decision to make a purchase? And sometimes it's brand reinforcement. I still remember I bought a car from BMW. A year to the day after I took delivery, they brought me a book that showed the car being built on their plant floor. And that was, for me, brand reinforcement. In consumer and buyer behavior, we were looking at expensive kids' safety equipment. And the more expensive it was, the better it looked. Well, it didn't necessarily make it better, it was just more expensive. But people wanted to pay more in order to protect their children.
Could you dive into the branding journey you undertook with FirstEnergy?
FirstEnergy, when we built our brand, pretty important that we had a logo. We evolved the logo over time. But it was also pretty important that we built our profile within the city. And how did we do that? Community service, charity. And we became very, very aggressive at being forthright and honest and candid in terms of supporting charities, so long as a client, past, present, or future, came to us with the request for the charity. We were generous to clients, generous to the point where we would say yes, literally on the spot. And it was meaningful amounts. By the time FirstEnergy had been up and running 3 years, we were probably supporting 300 unique charities. We were the first and maybe the only investment bank to be teased about having a heart. We truly had a heart relative to community, and we invented the idea of a charity event where people would come to our event. We'd pay for the event, but we'd ask our clients to pay for the charity. They brought a check in the amount of their choosing. We asked them to make it meaningful to them, but it was up to them. And so whether a check was $25 or $25,000, we said thank you to everyone. I can tell you I've had friends in other cities who've said, I can't believe you would take the risk of asking people to make a charitable donation that's subject to their choice. We choose the right people, we ask the right question, and the results are compelling. So we just leave it at that.
What drives your passion for philanthropy, and why do you consider charity a cornerstone of your values?
In part, it's wealth distribution. It's sharing the success you have as you grow your personal wealth, your business wealth, your team wealth, whatever you call it. So there's a bit of sharing. But let's also remember that whatever you fund, the intention is to make your community a better place to be. Making our communities a better place to be is one of the best investments we can all make. So part of it's charity, giving, but part of it, not to be lost, is investing in our own community. And that's why I do what I do in the Battlefords. My goal is to make the Battlefords a better place. Likewise, the Invermere Valley, I love that place. And so whatever I can do to help there, I will.
What kind of legacy are you working towards?
You know, at one time, a legacy of community participation was important, but I'm comfortable that I've done what I can, and I'm doing more as we go. So really, my go-forward strategy is to figure out how to stay healthy and connected to my grandchildren. The benefit, connect to my kids.